Hi, Atul Gopal, and we are on the 29th episode of our podcast series. As keeping it with the trend that has started, we've got guests coming in and talking to us. We are happy to welcome Mr. Pon here today, and he is based out of the Netherlands and is working in the research and development part of the GoEgo network. Pon has had more than 70 years of experience in charging technologies and is also the holder of two European patents. Holds a degree in electrical and electronics engineering and also an MBA degree in product management. So, welcome to the podcast, Pon.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the introduction, and I am very glad to speak to you today. I hope I can share some useful insights to everyone.
Pon, it's a very interesting company that you work with, GoEgo. You're sitting in the Netherlands, and the product is being developed for the Indian markets. Any particular reason why you chose to be in Europe for this, and any particular challenges in having a research center and the product market in another country?
Of course, you are correct. Most of the R&D started in the Netherlands, mainly because core members were located in the Netherlands already. When we designed our products, of course, the entire product development happened in the Netherlands, but keeping Indian customers, Indian power grids, and Indian environmental conditions in mind. So, from design perspective, we did not face much struggle, to be honest. But the challenges popped up when we started mass manufacturing in India from supply chain perspective. We had difficulty in sourcing some of the electronic components which we initially had in our prototype developments. In some cases, we had to redesign the enclosure or change the components. At the same time, we had to do it without compromising the European quality we built initially. So that was more challenging in terms of procuring and testing, validating multiple samples, and also establishing a supplier base within India. That should be the major challenge for us when we were migrating the product from Europe to India, from my perspective.
So, would you be also kind of building it to European standards and norms so that it can also be sold in Europe, or will that be a different product?
Founders always say, like, think globally and then act locally. That's exactly is what I take as a guideline. When we design a product, we always keep Europe as well as American market in mind. We try to comply to the European standards, international IEC standards. At the same time, local regulations like ARI certifications and stuff. So that we try to balance both of them in all our products.
Cool.
This episode of the Plug in India podcast is brought to you by our awesome Patreon and YouTube members. For as little as just $1 a month, you can contribute to the work of Plug in India and help keep the channel independent. Once you are a member, you get access to our Discord server where you can interact with the Plug in India team members on a daily basis. Go to www.patreon.com/pluginindia or click on the join button on our YouTube channel.
Okay, so coming back to the Indian market, Pon, listeners would want to know what is it about your chargers which are kind of making them better to the ones which are available at this point of time in the Indian market, and give us a reason to buy your charger.
Apart from truly making in India in our own ISO certified manufacturing plant, I think we clearly differentiate in three areas in comparison to many of our competitors. First is safety. We take customer safety as well as vehicle safety seriously. We don't compromise it on reducing the cost of the charger or installations. Our chargers comply to local ARI standards, as I was mentioning, also international IEC standards for safety. Second area is the efficiency. We don't use cheap components, again, to reduce the cost, which often heat and dissipate a lot of energy losses. All the components what we use inside our chargers are A-grade components, and all the models we build are rigorously tested and certified, and not only by us, but also by accredited labs like ARI. The third area, what I would highlight is all the GoEgo products are designed for grid and energy optimization, meaning they will all support smart charging profiles through which power grids can influence the charging cycle. And also most of our products can easily be integrated with external smart meters, batteries, and solar panels for providing the flexibility. This may not be a big topic today in India, but based on the learning from Europe, this is going to be super crucial in the coming years. Having said that, I also want to mention that we are the only Indian company who is certified by Open Charge Alliance. Almost every charge point operator in India uses OCPP protocol, but with a lot of custom implementations and without data security. But our products are fully tested by OCA, accredited labs in Europe. So to sum it up, who should buy our charger? My answer would be anyone who cares for safety, efficiency, and for future upgradability should buy our chargers.
One of the things that I'd like to pick you up on is the efficiency part. So I just would want to know, how do you compare in efficiency terms? For example, if you've got 10 kWh which is being pumped in from the grid into your charger, how much does it actually get delivered to the batteries, and how do you compare on that with other competitors in India?
We have some benchmark studies as well, but the efficiency is a combination of components what we typically use inside. If you use a more resistive cable connector or a contactor, then those components heats a lot because of the resistance, and then it loses the power. That's how we lose the efficiency. The market standard, again, I don't have the full numbers to justify, but roughly around 95% efficiency is what we see among our competitor markets, and we are close to 98%. I wouldn't say like we are 100%. There is still some amount of loss within the chargers, but it's far ahead in comparison to our rest of the market. We use the A-grade components so that they don't lose a lot of heat. They don't create any impedance inside.
3% increase in efficiency will translate to real rupee saving for people who are actually kind of operating these charging stations. So that's nice to hear. Something about the cost economics. How does it work in Europe and how does it work in India? Because they're two different economies, and you have an advantage of having exposure to both of them. So maybe a little bit of your thoughts on this.
Yeah, we all know cost in Europe is high. Cost of people and cost of manufacturing is super high in Europe. One hand, there is shortage of skill set in Europe, and the other hand, the number of customers are also comparatively low. I think these two are the reasons why the costs are really high in India. There is a rare resources and small market. That exactly are the two areas is an advantage for India, in my opinion. We have good amount of skilled people as well as a huge market to explore. E-mobility might have picked a bit late in India in comparison to the Western countries, but India can really overtake in a short span due to our market size as well as the cost effectiveness that we can provide.
When we look at the Indian market, we're probably segmenting it into probably the four-wheeler and the two-wheeler market. There is, of course, a relatively huge three-wheeler market, but I think that's all lead acid, and I don't know how many of them would be interested in your products. But let's start with four-wheelers. It's not a very big market as of today. I wanted to know what your take is in terms of, any particular technical solutions which are kind of required specifically for the four-wheeler market in India.
As you mentioned, India is predominantly a two-wheeler market. Nevertheless, I still feel the four-wheeler EV segment will also be a phenomenal growth in India. In my opinion, it will follow the hockey stick pattern. We are currently in the slow or already passing through the flat linear path. That's the bottom of the hockey stick. There are some regulatory issues as well within India. Very soon we will get into that non-linear rapid growth period. We may have just 6 to 8 four-wheeler EV models in India now, but in no time this will become 60 to 80. Say for example, in the Netherlands now, close to 62 different models of electric vehicles a customer can choose from. So this period is not far away in India. It's just a matter of a few years, then we will have so many models to choose from. This rapid growth means heavy demand, not only for electric vehicles, but also for chargers manufacturing and installations. And not to forget the heavy load on the power grid as well. So first, speaking of the impact on the charging, we are very much aware of the upcoming huge market demand. That is why we invested on such a large manufacturing facility. We can easily ramp up the production to the sudden demand of the market. Second is the impact on the power grid. Chargers need to be smart and work closely with the grids to optimize the capacity. Day, night, even hourly time optimization, source optimization, and dynamic load balancing with smart meters will become a necessity in the coming years. Charging hubs and plazas or charge stables, I don't know the exact term, what is popular in India now, but these charging plazas are increasingly popular in Europe now, where you can see a group of chargers, assume like 100 chargers to 200 chargers together dynamically charging the grid capacity, optimizing the currents on multiple vehicles. Maybe that's something will become relevant for India as well, and we are already prepared for it in terms of hardware as well as from our backend perspective. We have already implemented smart charging profiles, and the hardware also has the capability to connect in a cluster. Like you can have 100 stations together in a cluster with a Ethernet router, and one of the stations can act as a master, and rest of them can be a slave, and then they can optimize the power within themselves.
That gives me a very interesting idea. So we have a lot of cities where you have kind of grid coming in at a certain point, and you've got all your power kind of coming in over there. So in order to reduce distribution losses, it might be a good idea to have your public charging infrastructure located over there, especially for your say bus systems or something like that. And that would kind of make a life easier for all the service providers as well as the grid management, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was referring as charging hubs or charging plazas, which are becoming popular in Europe. I hope this will come to India as well sometime soon.
That's an interesting idea. Definitely should be shared with the state utility companies. Now, coming to the two-wheeler parts, today one of the big advantages of a two-wheeler is that you can use a common 5 ampere plug point, which is called ubiquitous. One of the questions that our listeners has is, if I already have it so simple, why should I kind of complicate things by using a charger from a company like GoEco? So what would be your answer to that?
You are correct. The customers are correct. The power coming from the regular 5 ampere wall plug is more than sufficient for most of the two wheelers in the market. Only a few models like Bajaj Chetak can take 15 ampere. Yet I would say it's really important to use a dedicated EV charging stations. The first reason is the heating of the wall plug. Most of the domestic wall plugs are not designed for continuous power delivery. They can work 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but they cannot work for an hour or 2 hours. If you have a good quality industrial plug in your home with a dedicated fuse protection for that plug, then of course there is no risk. But how many of us know the make and manufacturing quality of the wall plugs in our home? In some budget apartments, don't we see the switches and plugs fail within 2 to 3 years? At least in my apartment in Bangalore, within 3 years, the plugs have started failing. So that's the number one reason from my perspective. You should use a standard EV charging station. Number two is efficiency. We spoke about it a few minutes before as well. The heat, what you feel on the plug and the cable is nothing but the electricity that is being wasted, which in the end the customer pays for it. In bigger vehicles, the losses can be quite significant because they also charge for a longer period, and it will definitely reflect in a monthly energy bill. A customer might think like, why should I buy a charger now? But within 2 years, the energy bills, whatever the customer will save, will automatically break even the cost of a charger. This is why most of the EV OEMs, especially the four-wheeler manufacturers, always call the wall plugs adapters as emergency charging cables. And they explicitly mention not to use them on regular basis. You can refer it in Hyundai manual or MG manual. If you take any car OEM's manual, they always call it as an emergency wall adapter. And they explicitly mention not to use them for regular usage. The third reason, again, there is no possibility for load balancing and smart charging in regular plugs. As we were speaking, this may not be a big deal for now, but soon we will end up in a situation where the customer cannot use fridge and washing machine while charging the vehicle. At that time, we really need a smart charger to optimize the power consumption within a home.
Based on what you just told me, there's one kind of query that I have, which I face as a user. My vehicle is connected from the meter to an external charger, and that heats up quite a bit. So you talked about a 98% efficiency from your supply end, but can you give me some ideas to how much do I lose as thermal energy from my vehicle charger itself? What are the kind of norms for that?
From a customer perspective, I think we have to start tracking from the installation. From the meter cabinet, we run a cable to the charger as the input cable, again, which is very important. If it is just a 2-meter cable, then we lose less energy. If we are running a copper cable for 200 meters or 20 meters, then the energy loss on the input cable itself is significant. In the end, it's a copper which comes with some impedance, and also what kind of copper are we using. Some customers also use some aluminum cables or some alloys to save the cost, but we always use copper, which gives the better current conductivity. So that's one area where we significantly lose the power. And then within the charger as well, every electronic component, of course, you might see the plastic cover, but inside every contactor, every relay, there is a copper element again, which comes with the input impedance every time. So this is where we lose some energy. The electricity current, when it passes through that impedance path, there is some heat generated. But again, this amount within the charger is quite less. The major power what we lose is the input cable and on the output. The customer uses a standard cable or some adapter from the charger's output to the vehicle, which is again a longer path. That is another area where we lose the power as well. So three areas: input within the charger and output. So combinedly together is what I'm roughly indicating about 2% loss. We achieve this 2% mainly because we use good quality installation cables with thick cables, also our output connectors and the internal components with high quality components. Nevertheless, it is copper, there is impedance, so there will be some heat, there will be some loss.
Now, in two-wheelers, for example, you also have, people who are kind of companies which are providing, these chargers as a kind of complimentary service to their employees. So, in which case you don't really need any billing or anything like that. What you're saying is that it would make a lot of sense even if there is no billing, but you still need a charger because of the safety and the efficiency issues that you've kind of been talking about.
Yeah, that's one area. Again, from billing perspective, this may not be needed. But these companies are also wants to gain some insight on how much free power they are giving to their customers. And also, not now, but within Europe, there is a subsidy program as well. When you give power to the electricity grid, the companies can earn some green certificates. In that case, they are more interested on how many CO2 saving they make. So it's mostly from the inside perspective. Again, they might need a backend solution, connected services to gain how much power they sell and how it is being used, what kind of vehicles are connected. So it's mostly from the insights perspective, they might need it as well.
Now, another corporate use that is emerging is the delivery business, and especially, we're seeing companies like Domino's Pizza kind of going in wholesale for an electric fleet. So we also heard there was a fire which kind of was caused at the charging station, and probably they suffered huge crores of rupees of losses. So, given this kind of background, any specific solutions that you have to offer to such kind of delivery businesses where typically most of the charging might happen at night together, and what do you kind of propose for such kind of applications?
We are closely looking into the space as well. It's an interesting segment. Charging hubs with full dynamic load balancing will be needed for these fleet applications. But the implementation will be much more different than what we will provide for a real estate, say for example. In a real estate with a normal dynamic load balancing, we try to optimize the power among the vehicles connected. If 100 vehicles connected, we just try to do a round robin among them based on the grid capacity and then just optimize the capacity. But in this kind of fleet applications and delivery applications, we need to do priority charging rather than simple round robin or simple first in out normal profiles. Because uptime of this vehicle is super critical for the customers, that's the fleet management companies. We need to optimize, we need to make sure that the vehicle is fully powered for the next 6 hours or so. It's not like it's a 24-hour business, in my opinion, every delivery vehicle. They need to have full power at certain time, only then they can make sure their delivery schedules. That's why I feel like not just the dynamic load balancing, not just the priority charging, but also a API integration with the fleet management system. Fleet management system in the sense an API integration with the vehicles insights. Say for example, Tata might have an insight of their vehicles in their backend system. If we do an integration with car OEM's backend and our backend, then we can really get what is really needed, when is the departure time of that vehicle, and then based on that we can optimize it in a better way. As I mentioned, we are closely looking into it, but we don't have the solutions now. Mainly the OEMs are also not fully ready, so we are still looking into it.
I guess the first thing that is going to be required from a vehicle manufacturer perspective is to have some kind of CAN bus which is available in order to tag to the charger? Because today most of the vehicles that are being sold, electric vehicles being sold, don't have that kind of facility. Probably that would be the first step in this direction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the major hindrance for us as well. We are ready from the charger side, but that's not sufficient. Then we have to assume certain things and optimize our cycle. Instead, we should really get the real time insights and then optimize based on that.
So one of the things that I touched upon in the previous question, which probably did not get answered, is the safety thing, where because there have been certain experiences, the electric vehicle industry is obviously in the news for times where you've got vehicle fires happening, charger fires happening. So most of the people who are looking at making a transition to electric vehicles are very keenly wanting to know what kind of safety measures are in place. So let's talk about your own chargers. So can you just elaborate a little bit on what kind of devices are you using which will help not kind of get fire started or short circuits happening?
First, let me talk about the EV charging safety in general, right? So it's not just on the charger, it's not just on the vehicle, it's not just on the grid side as well. It's a combined flow. Start from the input cable to charger to vehicle and vehicle's cells within that vehicle. So it's a complete path needs to be ensured for the proper operation. If the charger is perfect and if there is something going wrong, then there is a risk. That's why we try to at least cover from the charger perspective. So at least I can mention three areas. One is the earth leakage circuit breakers we have, which will monitor AC leakage of 30 milliampere as well as 6 milliampere DC, which means like even if the vehicle's battery is old and if the battery is leaking, still the charger can detect from the output side. It is expecting certain amount of voltage and current on its output. When that pattern changes, when it detects the leakage, it will automatically stop. So that's the earth leakage protection we have on the output side. And also we have the overcurrent protection. Again, at two levels. One is on the firmware. We are continuously measuring the current which is going out. When it exceeds 105% or 110% for few milliseconds, few microseconds, and then we try to control it within the firmware itself. When it fails, then we have the second level of protection, that's the hardware fuse. So most of the cases, we should be able to control it purely from the firmware, but we also have the second level of protection, that's the fuses outside. They are foolproof, definitely. Third is the short circuit protection with fuses and RCDs. If there is a short circuit, it will not start at all. We will immediately get it. A good thing about our chargers and our backend solution also, the charger will immediately give this insights to our backend. It can immediately report, this is really the issue, this is why I'm not starting the charge. So these insights are really important so that we can fix them immediately and make sure the charger is available for the next time. In addition, we have some temperature sensors and some small sensors within the charger, which will not have a direct impact, but this gives us as a charge point operator to gain little more insight on what's happening inside the charger. And of course, all these safety measures, what I mentioned, earth leakage, overcurrent protection, short circuit, all are tested by ARI, and we have the certificate from them as well. It's all defined in the ARI standards as well as in IEC standards, and we tested accordingly.
So, Pon, I was just kind of talking to a person in Bangalore a few years ago, and their company was using some kind of machine learning and based that on current patterns in order to kind of, identify faults which were likely to happen. Okay.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to wonder if is there something in the future that you have in plan where, for example, that these are the current patterns that typically precede a short circuit, a possible kind of a failure in terms of safety. So is there something which you can do in terms of the machine learning analytics kind of a thing based on, are you recording the currents or, are you making use of that data which is kind of available?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we call it, like a predictive maintenance or proactive maintenance, whatever term we want to use. As of today, we are collecting a lot of data from the charger. That's why I was mentioning about the temperature sensors as well as the internal sensors, which are continuously giving us the input to our backend, which we store them. As of now, we have not started running any algorithm to detect the anomalies or anything. But in the future, when we have more data, especially again, data samples get better only when we have more samples. As of today, the whole country, we don't have that much data. Based on that, we can create some patterns. But we are collecting the data. That's the first step. In the coming years, when we have more stations, more components in the field, then we will be able to create some patterns out of it.
Just switching tracks and moving away from the safety in order to focus a little bit on durability. What we heard from a lot of battery companies is that the batteries are best when they are kind of slow charged, and most of your chargers are going to be fast chargers. So what effect does a prolonged fast charging have on degradation? And I'm talking especially of non-fleet owners, individual owners, societies, apartments where you're putting up fast chargers. What's going to be the impact on battery life for consumers of your this kind of target?
Yeah, it is true. Batteries degrade on high power charging. It is basic chemistry. We can't change it, and we cannot say no as well. It will degrade on high power charging. The more current we push, the batteries are going to degrade faster. But vehicle BMS, battery management systems, are becoming increasingly intelligent now. That come with intelligent cooling systems, and they also decide how much current to take at what moment. The charger might be ready to push 100 kilowatt per hour, but still the BMS decides how much current to take into the cells. So that's why you will be wondering sometimes the charger is a very high power charging, but the vehicle might be charging just at 30 kilowatt. In the end, it's always the vehicle's battery management system decides how much current to charge. That's why you will see this difference. That is also a reason why many of the car manufacturers don't recommend high power charging. But it should be, the intelligence is on the battery management system, not on the charger, in my opinion.
So basically, this is like passing the buck. You're just telling, okay, I know it's bad. Alcohol is an addiction and it is bad, but it's up to the user whether he wants to drink alcohol or not. Must be done in moderation. I guess that would be the answer.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a technical person. I should not sell something which is not true. But there are some clear use cases for fast chargers, right? For example, on a highway corridor, where as a driver, I'm always willing to compromise on my battery life instead of staying 10 hours on an unknown place. And also, if there is no possibility at my home or office for AC slow charging, then fast charging is the only option. So there are always some clear use cases, exactly as you were mentioning. It is bad for the vehicles, bad for the battery, but there are some situations we have to accept those losses.
Correct. Sometimes we need to celebrate with alcohol, right? So we are okay with
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you just mentioned about AC charging. So we when we been visiting the factory, we realized that there are some of your chargers which are like 20 kW AC chargers, and there are also DC chargers. So any impact on battery life between these two? Does it make any difference to the battery whether it's using AC charging or DC charging? Some words on that, Pon?
Yeah. AC charging, at least up to 22 kilowatt, are perceived to be really safe for the battery. It's like just maximum 32 ampere, right? Even if it is a 22 kilowatt, which is a safe current for the BMS as well within the vehicles. When we are pushing more than 100 kilowatts, that's when the BMS has to make some choices, whether to cool off my battery first and then start charging, or should I have to directly charge and then in parallel I cool off the battery. So that's where it's becoming a stress for the BMS. So AC slow charging is always safe. DC slow charging, it depends on the vehicle. If the vehicle has an intelligent BMS, say for example, you might have seen some videos like people are driving 1,000 kilometers with a small battery within 10 hours, continuously charging, and the vehicles work perfectly fine. So if you have a good vehicle with good battery management system, it's not really an issue. Of course, there will be a small degradation, but it's not going to end up in a breakdown or in a battery failure, complete battery. As an end customer, I always charge at my home, AC charging. But when I go on vacation, I definitely use a DC charger because 20 minutes is the maximum break I can take in between, and I definitely need DC charging there.
So, as a charger manufacturer, you need to be very agnostic towards battery chemistry. But is there any personal preference that you have for battery chemistries and any reasons for that?
Mostly, I would recommend going into the direction of a lithium polymer or lithium ion series instead of nickel, mainly because of the better composition and better reliability. But they are also expensive.
Okay.
As the market
Okay. Fair enough.
matures, when there is economy of scale, this will get better.
So we'll not take sides right now, but you're right. Nickel is expensive, and we will see Tesla moving away from nickel into other materials now. We just want to know what kind of different payment mechanisms are your chargers going to be supporting?
As of now, we support UPI as well as auto pay is possible, apart from our internal wallets. In fact, we support all the possible payment modes which are supported by Razorpay. I mean, like Mobile Quick, Free Charge, Amazon Pay, Ola Money, Phone Pay, Airtel Money, Pay app. It's like almost like 9 different wallets are supported through which we can top up the amount. And we are going to continuously expand it.
One of the other things that people in India is kind of, we've not been able to get the government to agree on a single set of chargers. So there's still a lot of talk going on about what would be best. So we've got Chedimo, we've got CCS. So what's your view on the kind of different chargers that are available, and any preferences that you have, and how do you see the future going over here?
My preference would be CCS2. Maybe I'm a bit biased. No doubt, Chadimo played an important role in e-mobility adoption. Many of the old cars like Nissan Leaf with Chadimo plugs were the one really kept the e-mobility segment alive in the last decade. Many innovations like V2G, V2X were still built on Chadimo, but that's being changed. Now the whole of Europe as well as America have converged into one standard, that's CCS2. Even the upcoming Nissan Ariya, the new car, will feature the CCS2. So even the Nissan is finally coming out of Chadimo. So I would only wish that Indian market also makes a strong suggestion towards CCS2. That will save us a lot of development time. We don't have to reinvent something that were already proven in the large part of the world, right? And converging to CCS will also give us a huge economy of scale advantage. Start from connectors to cables to software stacks. The more we have all across the world, there will be a better supply chain. So in that perspective, I would be definitely in favor of converging into CCS2.
Yeah, but one of the problems with CCS2 is that the guns are not being made in India, so that's a very expensive component for us to kind of. So, any take on that? Do you think, because I think you're procuring them for your own equipment, so what do you think are the indigenization efforts on that?
Yeah, you are completely correct. Cables, connectors, not only CCS, even the Type 2 is a challenge within India. We don't have that many internal suppliers. We end up importing from China, Korea, or from Europe, which is often expensive. And from my perspective, I think the industry has to address it as a challenge instead of just complaining about. Maybe this is an opportunity for the local companies to come up with their own manufacturing facilities inside as well. Same as you, I'm also looking forward for some Indian suppliers to come up with CCS plugs. That will help us a lot. Not only GoEgo, but every charge point operator manufacturer within India.
I hope GoEgo becomes one of those vendors for itself.
Yeah, we hope so. It's a big choice. It's a big business. As of now, maybe we are not ready, but
Okay.
it's definitely one area we should explore.
Now, again, some very charging protocols, especially people. What we've heard, battery manufacturers saying that we should not charge immediately after using the car, and we can let the car cool down and then kind of start charging. So, if this is correct, can your chargers take care of that? That you start with a slow kind of current, let the temperatures cool down inside the battery, then pick up as the kind of temperatures reduce. So, your thinking on this?
Yeah. What you say is theoretically correct. Batteries need to be cooled, but in most of the modern vehicles, the BMS, battery management of the vehicle, takes care of it. When you plug in the charger, the BMS mostly uses the first few kilowatt hours of energy to just cool off its battery. Vehicles don't share their internal cell temperatures to the charger, even in CCS or Chadimo. They only share the current demand and in some cases departure times and state of charge as well. But they never share the cell's internal temperature, how much it is. Of course, through CAN, through ODB, you can read it, but not via charger, they don't share it. In that case, chargers do not have control on it. It's always the BMS which decides what should be the ideal current, maximum current it can handle based on the cell's temperature, age, and health of that battery. So we just obey what the BMS says. Based on that, we provide that much current. That's how the protocol is also made. We don't have that insight to optimize from the charger side. It always happens from the vehicle side.
Which is a pity in a way, because for example, there's a user who is going to put a car for overnight charging, right? And your BMS decides that I'm going to use 5 kWh to just kind of cool the car so that I can start charging immediately. And that's kind of a waste, because we have a lot of time available usually, and if we had some way of knowing that, we could end up kind of saving electricity for everybody. So it seems to be a little bit of siloism, which in future may not really end up being very good for either the BMS or for the this thing. So anyway, I don't think there's too much you can do about it, but that's what it looks to me.
Yeah, exactly. That's the challenge mainly for the charge point operators to explain it to our end customers. They don't really get it, why it is happening. Of course, I bought a very high power charger, but it's not really charging, or I don't know what's happening now. The explanation part is really difficult for us. Moreover, there is a huge variation from one model of vehicle to the other as well. There is no single explanation. We have to really ask what is the vehicle. If it is a Hyundai Kona, this is how it behaves. If it is a MG ZS, this is how it behaves, which is a big challenge, and I hope the situation gets better.
About just 1 weekend ago, I did a kind of a run from Nasik to Pune, which is about 250 kilometers on a Nexon. And I was just comparing my average watt hours per kilometer with the actual electricity that I paid for. And I found that there is a huge amount of difference between the two.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether my situation is kind of generic, or are other people are also kind of facing this, or it's only specific to me. But in your experience, when I look at the vehicle watt hour per kilometer versus what you supply from the charger, what is the typical difference that you see? Because some of that energy will obviously be getting lost in the internal charger that the car has, or maybe there are other situations. So any particular experiences that you would like to share over here on this?
Again, it changes from vehicle to vehicle. I drive a Hyundai Ioniq, where first 4 kilowatt is always used for the battery conditioning, and it will never appear on my dashboard and on my car app. But my charge point operator app shows a different kilowatt hour, but my vehicle says something different. The battery SOC doesn't raise at all, whereas the charge point operator says it's already charging. So there is a bit of clash already with the Hyundai Ioniq. Same with the Tesla. Tesla almost consumes first 6 kilowatt really at slow speed from the user perspective, but it takes the full power internally just to condition its battery. It's a huge variation from model to model. That's hard to generalize. Yeah, we are at least internally thinking of writing stories for each and vehicle. This is how this vehicle will build. When you plug in, this is how it reacts, and this is how we will do it, and this is the reasoning behind. We are thinking of writing an articles for each and every model.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now coming back to India from Europe, we kind of talk of some specific Indian kind of a thing. So again, going back to this Nasik Pune trip. So I had a situation where the electricity just kind of went off while I was charging. Now, this is not something you expect so much in Europe, but this is, especially in rural India, this is kind of, when we're looking at highways, we're typically looking at rural, charging stations at midpoints or wherever in between cities. So anything that you're thinking of, which kind of, because the billing can take a full toss during that time, and there's a plunger, for example, which locks the CCS charger, and that kind of stays locked, and you can't take that out. So these are very India specific things. So anything that you have to kind of say as far as your design is concerned based on these situations?
GoEgo chargers, as well as most of the other chargers as well in the market, have an emergency push button that will, or at least should, release the cable as well. If there is an internal lock within the car. Some cars you have to manually release it. If you put it in auto mode, it's perfectly fine. But if you handle it manually within the car side, you can release it only from the car side. So that's one car dependency. Apart from that, if you just push the emergency push button, you should release the cable at least from the charger side. In our product, we also take care of it a bit more smarter. We use normally open locker motors, which closes only when the charging starts and opens up as soon as the session ends or the power is cut off. Whereas some of the competitors use normally closed relays or in some cases even solenoids to reduce the cost, which works completely the other way around. It's always closed, and when they have to start the session, they open it up. In principle, it's okay, but when there is a power outage, these kind of scenarios, um, unless they really have a small battery to release it, they will not be able to release the car. In that case, only the emergency push button will be the savior. Then speaking of the commercials, that's also something what you asked. We or our partner LCPs will not lose any sessions. There's no money loss. We have a local memory that continuously stores the latest sessions. It's being overwritten. I think we have roughly around 5,000 cycles we can store. It is being overwritten again and again. So including the authentication information, what was the authentication code and when exactly that time it started and how much power it delivered so far. So we continuously check it, and then this information comes to the backend as soon as the station comes online the next time. Maybe there's a power outage now. After an hour, if the station comes back online, we get the lost session details, including the timestamp and authentication code. So by that perspective, there is no real commercial loss.
Do you think this can be misused by end customers? Especially how Jugadu Indian drivers are, that they know that if I push the emergency button, I don't need to pay and I can go off like that. So is there a possibility of misuse because of all the things that you mentioned?
Yeah, it's happening already. I should admit, some drivers just use it to avoid some billing, but they don't avoid. At least in our cases, for whatever consumed will always come back to our backend, even if you click the emergency push button. We will have that data. But on top of it, we are also trying to have a better enclosure design where we have a glass outside, easily breakable glass. So you cannot do accidental mishaps if the customer has to be really determined to do some malpractice.
So again, particular to India, is you have an input which is 3-phase into your charger, at least some of your chargers, and again there is a practice that the state electricity boards have in rural areas is after certain hours they will convert the electricity to single phase. So what happens to your charger in such a scenario? Suppose this is a 3-phase charger, suddenly you lose 2 out of those 3 phases. Will the car still continue to charge, or will the scooter still continue to charge, and how do you kind of design for that?
Yeah, it is a problem, but when only one phase is present, we usually charge at 3.7 kilowatt. We use the least current, just 16 ampere per phase is what we use. And to the maximum, if there is sufficient grid connection, we go up to 7.4 kilowatt. As I mentioned, it's a problem, but not so big, since we will have more time also in the evening. Typically, they do this exercise of switching from 3-phase to single phase, mostly in the evenings and late nights. During that time, we also have a longer duration, roughly 8 hours, to compensate this slow charging period. So it's still functional, but not up to their full capacity.
Right. So, upon coming towards the conclusion, one of the things which is again a peculiarity of the Indian electrical ecosystem is earthing, or rather the lack of it. So, how does your charger behave as far as earthing is concerned? So if there is some problem in the earthing, does it kind of tell the charging station operator that this has to be rectified, and any kind of inputs on that?
Yeah. We have earth leakage protection within the charger on the output side, as well as in some cases, even the input. The Bharat AC charger, we also have the protection on the input side. Typically, we use a Type B, RCBB Type B, which can detect both AC leakage as well as DC leakage. AC leakage can come from the input side, mostly within the charger and everywhere. But the DC leakage mostly comes from the vehicle's battery itself. So we try to cover from both the sides. So whenever there is a AC leakage of more than 30 milliampere, the station will immediately stop, and then we get an error message to the backend. Same is the case for 6 milliampere DC leakage as well. When that threshold is met, it immediately stops the charging, and then we get a message to the backend. So in both the cases, the session stops automatically, but the station will be completely active, and then we get an error message to backend, and then we respond to it.
Right. So I think we've touched a lot upon safety today, and I think I for one seem to be quite convinced that there is a lot to be done in the charging station space, and I'm really tempted that whenever I buy my next electric vehicle, I should probably invest in one of your chargers. But anyway, Pong, it was great talking to you. We had a lot of insights that came in through this conversation. It would be interesting to connect with you maybe a year down the line to see how much data you've been able to gather and what insights you've been able to get from that data. So looking forward to that session again. So thank you very much and have a great day. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the very interesting questions. I must say I really enjoyed the last 1 hour or so. Your questions were really insightful, and I hope I answered them to the best of my knowledge. It was really entertaining. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Plug-in India Electric Vehicle podcast. You can find transcripts for each episode on our website. Plug-in India is an EV advocacy group and a social enterprise dedicated to promoting electric vehicles and sustainable transport in India. You can write to us at support@pluginindia.com, or you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We are self-owned and not a part of any large media organization. If you want to support our work, why not become a Patreon supporter or a YouTube channel member? It helps in paying our staff and bandwidth. You can also support the show for free. Write a review or recommend us to your friends and family. Every little bit helps. Subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Thanks for listening. Bye.